Give a warm and wonderful welcome to Ian McConville.
You lost it? Tech crew, the other mic, please. Yep. Go.
Thank you.
Solid.
Ready, Teddy? All right. Hello. So, how many of you have heard of the game Spiral Knights? All right. Just making sure. Then I will spare the introduction about premium MMO payment models and all that kind of stuff. So, as you know, Spiral Knights is a free-to-play game by 3 Rings. A couple of years ago, I was tapped to join the project to do the art direction for it. At the time, it was meant to be a very small project. It was going to be a couple months, just myself, a designer, and an engineer. And it just sort of grew from there. But when I started off, there was no concrete direction for how it was going to look. We just knew we needed a very low-impact art style as far as our assets. So low polygon count, low pixel count, keep the particle effects to a minimum. Since it's grown a bit bigger than that in both game size and game asset size. I'm going to load up here some of the first, well, this is the first sketch of a Tech Knight. Here we are. At the time, it wasn't called Spiral Knights, it had no name, it was called Project X. And these guys were just called Tech Knights. And this is the first ever doodle of one of them. You can see, sort of hazily in the background, the first ever tile set as well. It was very rudimentary. There's breakable blocks, non-breakable blocks. It was lots of browns, grays, and greens. We hadn't really settled on a palette yet. Obviously in this sketch, there's just gray. But at the time, we didn't know what we were going to be doing with the Knights. There was more tech than Knight. Soon after that, I started doing doodles along these lines, trying to develop a personality, trying to find how can a suit of armor have character. And a lot of that was playing with height, playing with accessories, just general posing, and trying to make the eye slits have personality of their own. I felt some fun things came out of it. Let's see, we have another one trying to show more action. There we are. As you can see again, it was more of a tech than Knight type of situation. At the time we discussed having, since the player is going to be limited to a suit of armor, we wanted to give them their own sort of personality in that they choose a color, and that's where the personal color that comes from now came from, and that's, you see these little bits that are colored sort of lightly on the screen. Those are going to be the recolor bit. At the time I thought they were just going to be exclusively glowing Tron bits. We soon realized that these were very minuscule, not that, it didn't really play a big part in who the character was. So since then we've gotten a lot bigger. Here's another example. Characters were starting to get a little bit more Knight than tech, and this was the second character model we did for the game. There we are. You can see our original logo. This later turned into various other armor sets as it was cannibalized, but as you can see, lots and lots of tech, not much Knight, and the recolor bits, just little tap-like light bulbs throughout the armor. It's pretty... You'll notice that this guy is set up in grayscale. This turned into the color method we use for all the armor. When I build a character, I first render it completely in grayscale, baking in the lighting into the model. Like, there is no lights received on this character model. It is all part of the texture. The reason being is because characters in our game do not receive lights. It's just cheaper and more efficient and allows weaker computers to handle our game, and at the same time allows me personally more control of the characters. The problems I've run into over the years with this is that if the character isn't in a vertical stance, they become a jumbled mess of armor. Like, you plop them down, say, have them sit, have them kneel, something like that. They are hard to parse, and that has been something I'm trying to compensate for over the years. I don't feel I've quite nailed it down yet, but I've come up with some more ideas that I'll explore in future armor sets. So, at the time we were still doing an in-house multiplayer test of whether we thought this game was going to be fun. I mean, that's an important step when you're trying to make a game. And I was still, while that was going on, I was trying to nail down what these characters were going to look like. And that led to one of my more successful tests, which was the 5-minute doodle gallery here. I spent a good week just doing nothing but sitting at my desk and drawing 5-minute doodles of nights. The reason being is because I would spend too long overthinking these characters. I needed snapshot impressions, something that would be memorable to look at. So I just sat there, I had an egg timer, I'd draw a doodle. When it hit, I was done with that sketch and moved on. And that produced this very long collection you can see before you. This is not all of them, but you will see that, for those of you that are familiar with the game, some aspects have indeed made it into the game. This is a starting armor. We have a plate mail down there. This is also a helmet that made it into the game. So it was a pretty successful test. There's also one of the other starting armors. Again, we still hadn't nailed down the recolorable aspects, so we're still using little gems and such. This suit is very clearly inspired off of something else I see. This is something that when I was starting out with this project, you'll notice, like with this character, no feet, little peg legs, even over here. This is something I got a lot of pushback about in the beginning, but I felt it was important to make these characters top-heavy, since it's a top-down only game. I want to make these characters wedge. Like, even if the camera wasn't moving, you'd be able to see a depth to them. So that's why there was the little peg legs. It's also really cute. These three are the first character models that were final, so to speak. We nailed down 3 character models we wanted to use for our initial testing. So we had what I dubbed the femme armor, the masculine armor, and the neutral armor. And we just wanted to see how well that flew with people. We found that this armor was actually the most popular. I never quite figured out why. I think it just is widely appealing. But I thought it came out pretty cool. I ended up using it for all the NPCs in the game. Let's see. Oh, this is a minor note. You can kind of see in this drawing, it's harder to see on the projector, but there's this sort of grid lines going back here. That is the golden ratio, sort of 3:4 ratio that is very pleasing to the eye. I based the characters heavily off that. Almost every aspect, the head versus the body, the hand versus the arm, it's all part of that golden ratio, that 3:4. I don't know if it's really that noticeable, but I felt it helped me keep a consistent proportion throughout the characters in the game. And here we have. This is the first color test of all the knights, those starting 3 armor sets. Originally, the characters were very drab, very, well, more like this guy over here. Lots of earth tones, lots of grays and browns. And I got feedback of we want to see more lively characters, make them jump out of the background, and I agreed. So the inspiration I took from was Phantasy Star, the original. Phantasy Star Online, the original, not Universe and all that. You'll notice these color palettes are very reminiscent of those starting classes. Here, I believe this guy in the back here. And that helped me get on the right track. I don't believe many of these color sets, actually none of these color sets actually made it into the game, but it was a good starting point. Some of them are modified, like this is a similar to one of the ones we used in the game, but it had some rebalancing. Yeah, here's an example of early color sets. Let's see, lots of grays, lots of browns, a lot of tech, not a lot of night. Though this was, I should mention, this is the first gun we ever made for the game. I called it the toaster with a handle. It later became a weapon called the Magnus. Let's see here. Yeah, there we are. You can actually see somewhat the faint lines here that there is actually a sort of regular looking gun built in here. It's just like, that's not fancy enough. We've got to put useless things on it. Make it big and readable. So that's sort of the introduction of how the Knights started their look, I don't know, just their essence, so to speak. How it came to the like black mage, no face, floating eyeballs, suits of armor you see. Before I move on to some of the more equipment stuff, is there any questions involving the armor?
What's your favorite set of armor?
I'm a big fan of the demo suits. That one came a lot later. This is our in-game model viewer we use to test our assets. Let's see here. But I'd say this one's my personal favorite when we set it up. There we go. I think this is my personal favorite combination. I don't know, I like the big chunky characters. It just has a nice Tonka toy quality to it. I don't know. When I'm designing my characters, that's something I often look at. It's like, would I want a toy in this? The answer is no, I don't think I did a good job.
Are you ever planning on doing Spiral Knights toys?
I would love to. It's a really tricky thing to go into physical media. I really know nothing about getting mock-ups and molds made and such. I think Three Rings just wants to focus on digital distribution, but I can't be quoted on that.
Fair enough.
Oh, I just saw this guy. This was here, a quick tangent. These guys. Before Spiral Knights, there was a thing called World. Actually, I think it was originally called MSoy. But, let's see here, looking for a file. There was a card game we were working on called like Underworld Drift. There we are, yeah. It was a Flash-based sort of Super Nintendo kind of Mario Kart game. And it was sort of a side project me and a couple coworkers were doing. The idea was little demons and such racing carts, and that's where the original Devil Light came from. You can see some of the low poly models. Yeah, that character also made it to the game. There's a thing called a Soul Jelly, but he's a very rare monster. Ah, there we are. I believe this character was about 200 polygons, which is extremely low. But yeah, later we were talking about reintroducing this character, and I wanted to do some tests about like how to make it more readable, like, give it more personality, and that turned into like different archetypes, like the middle class worker, the middle manager, and then the overtimer. I personally like how this guy, he has a tie, but it's just stapled onto his chest. And for reference, there we are. He has a couple of items that are... I wonder if anyone has ever really noticed that logo. But, yeah. So really quick, I want to touch on the weapons from the game. The gear in general. Now, an oversight on my part was I didn't install Photoshop on this, so I can't open the PSD files very effectively, but I can open up some of these flat things. as I was talking about before, we are a lot heavier on the tech and less on the knight. So this was the first shield design we had. You can still sort of see this in the main game in that it was used as the reference for the shield icon. One of the key things I learned about working on these weapons, though, was characters and equipment I wanted to break down into 3 parts visually: a primary, a secondary, and a joint. Now, with these these pictures that are in black and white, that's hard to picture, I guess, so I'll open up these. So when you look at this primary, secondary, joint, the reason being is because the camera is so far away and we're set to a static view, I wanted to make sure something was immediately recognizable as a particular asset just on the color scheme and silhouette alone. And that comes from the squinting and seeing chunk of red, chunk of gray, and then a little tan bit in the middle. Oh, which I guess you can't see pretty well. This also is evident in the logo the Spiral Knights use as well. The primary, secondary, and joint. I don't think this shield ever made it to the game. We called it the Shining Ward. It was the same model as the Defender, just a different alpha map. This is the first pass of weapons of the game as well. You can see okay, you can't see, but there's a red color here, a gray color here, and then my joints color. This turned into the consistent gun style we used throughout the game. Oh man. I gotta say, the Divine Avenger, if I'd known it would have become like the bread and butter weapon of the game, I would have made it a little less gaudy. It's tough because when I'm designing these weapons, I have 5 stars to work with. And that means they need to start out somewhat drab and grow over time. That means by the end, they're looking pretty spectacular and flamboyant. And after that, when I need to make new stuff that's even more flamboyant, like, where do I go? This one has a holographic, glowing edge to it. I've been trying to ease off for my own sanity's sake.
Can you scroll through the weapons slower?
No. Here you go. My apologies, there we go. So this was the first pass at all the swords in the game. Before we actually launched, we didn't really get to much chance to make many more than this, because I'm only one artist, but I was pretty happy with the silhouettes that was created. As you can see, there's sort of a echoing theme of this sort of energy logo. Early on I decided that in order to help represent this energy system in the game, the core underlying currency, wanted to be visible in the Tech-Knight equipment, so like you can see the stuff is powered by and uses the energy to some extent. So you'll see these cores used almost in every single piece that is made by a Tech-Knight. As for stuff that is not made by a Spiral Knight, you'll see that it lacks that sort of aspect. It becomes archaic and relic-like. Early concepts for the auto guns looked a little more Uzi-esque, but I felt it wasn't bulky enough. It looked too much like the starting weapon, so I ended up going more Nerf striker type look. I'm also pretty happy with the alchemy gun here. The idea of mixing liquids and such and shooting it out to produce fiery and freezing effects. I don't know, I was pretty happy with it.
What's your favorite weapon set?
So a big fan of the Troika series. I'm working on some new ideas, but I'm a big fan of the weapons that you have to commit to the hit. Something that there's a bit of risk and reward to using them, and so that I like the slower type stuff, the things that you are vulnerable and then you get a big payoff. You get to see enemies flying across the screen. I find that tension to be satisfying, rather than a slow or a fast pecking weapon. I like, though, with that said, I like the flourishes lately. Mostly because any way I can make a wolver suffer, it just makes me actually look. Yeah, this is what a character model looks like before I color it. This is the first set we ever used, and that's why it's also the one that default loads up on a character model and then gets replaced. Now and again, there'll be a glitch on the server that results in players running it looking like this. It's apparently very appealing to some people, but to me, I just go, oh, it's so broken. Stop that. Let's see here. Yeah, this weapon series here. Directly after we launched the game, I had a week to make up a whole new series of weapons. And, the designer and I shot back and forth about what we were doing, and I eventually started working on these guys. And very happy with the results because it kept that Tech-Knight flair with the elements and the extra filigree. I was really concerned about making a very narrow weapon like this because when you're pulled out so far, thin little weapons just don't look very appealing. So I was going for more of a spike on a handle, something that looks fun and barbarous. Speaking of barbarous, it's eventually recolored into the snarble arm. I think it was this weapon set that the graphics engineer developed a new type of particle effect for the game that resulted in my ability to have streaming particles. It's hard to see, but there's a bit of a lag behind the sword. I had some great fun adding that to a couple of weapons. I think I sell it as being this elegant, sharp weapon with practically cutting the air behind it. I almost forgot about this. This was our proposal image for the game. It was to give an impression of what the game would look like, what it would feel like. It was, I don't know, I felt it captured the essence of the fun you could have with this game. Like, you see this angle, you see this character, you see a sword, a shield, blue creatures, you know what this game's going to be about just by looking at this picture. And, I don't know, I was pretty satisfied with it. You can see an early impression of a gun puppy back here on the pedestal. A gun puppy is a turret-type weapon that was made in early alpha. I'll look him up. We're working on the alpha version for in-house testing. And we realized that we only had Trojans and jelly cubes. And we realized that wasn't really showing the breadth of the gameplay we were looking for, so like, we need a turret-type monster, we need it now. So this guy was built in about 2 days. Like animations, skin, everything. And as a result, he's one of the dearest in my heart. He just, I don't know, it's a stationary gun, but it has personality, it makes me happy. Of course, everyone likes this version better. This was, when we originally started, you saw that sort of the floating island screenshot I was showing you there. For a while, we were talking it's going to be a clockwork world, and it's going to be, a giant machine, but we'd never once shown anything that even resembled gears or machinery or anything. It was like, well, we better make a tile set that's clockworks then. So this was the initial concept for all that, this little taste. Our environment designer, Corey, also known as Boswick, he built this tile set completely off this concept here, And since then, we both agreed that the Clockworks really lacks a lot of Clockworks, in particular gears and such. So he's slowly been adding that into the game over the years. Originally, we made a lot of jokes that Clockworks was just about pipes, you know? Clocks were run completely on pipes, right? Yeah, you'll see in like Haven and such, just pipes everywhere, because clearly that's what you think of when you think of gears.
There's lots of gears in the skyboxes, right?
True, there was, though technically that skybox came almost a year after initial development. What you're talking about, let's see. This came actually quite late in development. It is a, wrong model. We were trying to sell the idea that we could have big blue skies and nice outdoor environments, but still keep it within the underground surface that is our world. And so that came up with this whole Clockwork Sky Dome. And actually, a few players who had keen eyes have noticed a few things about this. Let me stop time real quick. Working in the scaffolding are some gremlins. That one's on break. Sometimes my project lead has to remind me, don't obsess about these things now and again because you have deadlines to meet, and I then turn around and put the gremlins in the skybox. Not exactly the best use of my time, but it makes me smile. Looking for one called Scott. Oh, okay, that's not going to load up. I had an original skybox that was made prior that was oh, goodness gracious. Ah, there it is. My apologies. I'm going to restart the model viewer. With that initial beta, or alpha, I was showing you, talking about that sky, type of island type stuff. And this was the first skybox we made for it. Goodness gracious. It seems I'm not really going to be able to show it because the file has been modified. You can kind of see what's going on here with some clouds, some shininess. The issue that we had with it, though, was our camera angle for the game is not this. Our camera angle is this. So it was like, wow, that's a nice cotton you got there. So this skybox was essentially scrapped before launch. Throughout the course of development, we had a couple different load screens. I think this is my personal favorite. This makes me smile. It's also the first ever stranger sketch, talking about these giant, intimidating, almost like robot-like characters that have little birds that they're obsessed with. You can see, where is it? Ah, here it is. I started to flesh out the character a bit more, and this became the final design. I want to emphasize like these intimidating characters, these knights, and yet they are completely friendly and docile, speaking little whirling, chirpy noises and such, different hat ideas. The problem with some of my earlier concepts, though, here's one idea, and all sorts of stuff. Like, here's this guy, like, oh, I think I'm on the right track. The more I look at it, I wonder, okay, this is not sitting right. This just isn't jiving. Something sits wrong with it. And I took another glance at it, and I realized what it was that was bothering me about this concept. Yeah. I stepped away from the sketchboard for a while after that. Just, we're going to let that percolate for a bit. But yeah, eventually we came up with this guy, who people referred to as slugs for a while because of their long cloak. Just for a random note, this character right here is the Trojan. This texture isn't used in the game anymore, but this character model is. It is the oldest character model in the game. It was the first ever character we made that is still in the game today because the knights we made first got scrapped, but this guy is still in it. But sadly, he's one of the most underdeveloped characters in the game, I feel. It's just, he has a, I want to say, a very predictable fighting pattern. It just feels stale, in my opinion. But that's not my job. I make it pretty. Initial concepts. When we were shopping around for publishers, we wanted to make sure we had things to show that was not just fighting, things to give an idea of character and like curiosity about the world. And so that resulted in referred to as the slime attack picture. It's just like the character's not fighting, but just doing something weird. Makes you curious about the game. And this is the slime family portrait. This guy actually became our lead's avatar in the forums. He just became so happy with the posh cube. Any other questions right now?
Can you actually talk about a little bit about monster design?
Sure. Let's start with this. I was talking about before my idea about the primary, secondary, and joint colorization. You'll notice I continue the idea of the vertical structure on all the characters and then broke it down into these three primary color areas. That is held true for the most part with the character design. Let's see. This guy, I will point out one thing about the Trojan here. It's something I always noticed in cartoons as a kid. You'd see that character who has the big, bulky upper body and then they give cartoony, tiny legs. Now I realized the problem with animating a character like that in a real-time game. In order to make something that is intimidating is not a fast-moving deal. It's like an imposing, steady force. That is hard to do with tiny legs. I did my best, but I feel the walk cycle ended up being, how to put it, like the Trojan was trying to tiptoe past its parents' room at night. So here it is in its final form. Don't wake up, Mom. Yeah. He's a flaming skeletal biped horse and he tiptoes. Now. Recently, we're needing more, here's the initial concepts of the Trojan. I was trying to go for a chess piece type of look, so I was getting like a kilt or a dress-like thing going on. I almost wish I had done that, just so that way I wouldn't have had to show my legs and just let it sort of scoot around. But in the end, it just, yeah, we went with the more peg-like approach. Though one of the designs that we were using for the Trojan eventually got recycled for something else. Like we're talking about this guy who's like heavily armored and very very worried about his own safety, so we have like just layers and layers, and that just later became this guy actually, who for a while was the only boss in the game. I believe his name's Vanaduk. You can see an echo of that earlier sketch we were showing. As I said, I did not prepare by having Photoshop installed, so I have to use Elements. This is some of the first stuff for Gremlins. The initial idea was that they're going to be sentient tools that just run around and build the clockworks and such. You can see our wrench head going on right here, sort of wrapped in a hoodie and such. But we felt that was that really didn't differentiate them from constructs, so we wanted that to be its own separate thing. So we started developing them further, and I like the idea of these sort of rabbit, rat, chittery, rodent-type creatures, something that was more, had a vermin feel to it, something that's running around under the floorboards, something that's not really seen all the time, and that's where this came up, or came from. I also like the idea of their mouths, when closed, looking very petite and almost, well, not even there, and then they open up and reveal this snarling maul. But of course, you know, given the limited facial animation I have in a very low poly count game, they're always snarling and bubbling. I also wanted to make sure all their weapons were reminiscent of tools, so they, there we are. As you can see, the wand that this character uses is a wrench. The hammer that he ended up using, which this is not a hammer. This originally started out as an axe. I just chopped that bit off and called it a hammer. Though I don't really know what Mind's part play, but one thing I noticed, whenever you have an anthropomorphic character, what is it with having the feet exposed? Is that just so you know it's an animal? This is the first Snarble sketch. When Nick, the project lead, pitched the idea to me, being this sort of Alice in Wonderland-esque monster like Snarble-axe, you know, Vorpal Blade, that kind of stuff. It's like, well, it's got to be this mix and match of different monsters and such. We get, like, talking about chicken legs and all sorts of stuff, and that eventually it boiled it down to lizard butt, furry head. Became this. I like the idea of him having a big sharkish maw. He actually has a couple rows of teeth. But when you first encounter him, he's wrapped in living shadow. He looks very mysterious and intimidating, and then you knock that shadow off and you make him vulnerable. And at the same time, now he looks almost, I want to say skittish, like vulnerable. I was pretty happy with that effect. As you can see, I continue the peg legs, if only because it saves me on 4 extra bones I have to animate. This guy's armor set ended up being one of the most popular in the game. I guess people like dark trench coats. The original idea for Wolvers was these little creatures that you didn't actually see the body to. You just saw like the head and the tail skittering through the grass and such. And we realized that really wouldn't have worked because not all our levels are in grassy plains. So they ended up gaining bodies and having this sort of, I want to say, playful look. And that was further emphasized by the randomly, instead of biting or charging, they would just bark. And I feel that gives them a lot of character. This is what was called a bog cub. It is currently not used in the game. It existed early in beta. We just don't have a place for it at the moment. Maybe we'll pull it out at some point when we have a solid idea of what we want this to do. But for now, it's, you know, it's just a phony Wolver, and we have those, so there's no reason to pull him out again. Eventually, we'll, if we do bring him out, though, like you can see some of his old model files here. So here's the final model file of that guy. Let's see, there we are. If we were to use this guy again, though, I'd probably want to up the detail on him because the art style has kind of left this in the dust, so to speak. I think it's very illustrative, not a whole lot of detail. It's just, you know, a flat color with some hashy lines on it. And I just don't feel that holds up to the current levels of art style, where you see, like in the, you take a look at Gremlin. I don't know. I feel there's just more detail, there's more grit. Granted, this is kind of a low resolution texture, but you get the idea that it's just, it has more substance to it, less impressionistic. Just bringing this guy up. This is called the Grimalkin, and he's a antagonist in a series of levels called the Clockwork, or Candlestick Keep. Thank you. Originally, I was working on this guy, like, all right, he looks pretty intense, and then I started working on his like activate animation, and I felt I just got it a little too cute looking. It's just. But I guess that's a good juxtaposition. Before we got Harry, our sound designer, to give us unique sound effects for it, I originally had various like popping and mewing play when he was spawning, so it'd be like, makes me happy. Early on, we needed a construct grunt, as it's called. So we talked about his missing texture. So we needed just a character that was pretty much not really a threat, but just a presence in the construct kingdom. So that's where this little scuttlebot comes from. Though afterward, we needed a character for the training hall. And so that resulted in the Shufflebot, which actually, now we only had a very short amount of time to produce this guy. You can, so I didn't have time to make a whole lot of unique animations for him. So actually, if you were to look closely, you see how he's sort of squishing, how he's bounding around, like how the feet get squished out and shift. That is because, this is perhaps giving away a little secret, but he shares animations with this guy. Has the same exact walking animation. Just attach a foot to each of those corners and you have the Shufflebot. We've had to do that quite a bit given our limited resources and team size, but it allows us to be rather dexterous and go, well, we need to change things. Turn on a dime and take care of it. And that's good fun.
So do you build characters based on those limitations? Like you'll take a jelly cube and you'll say, we need to make a robot that, but we don't really have the resources to rig a new model. Should we just take this skeleton and like reseed it?
It comes up a lot. We look at gameplay-wise, what is missing, like where the holes are, and we need to fill this with a specific role. And then I'm approached with, we need a character who's a construct grunt or something like that. And like, okay, perhaps I can remix these bits here and try and spin it as a new guy without feeling just like a recolor. Because while this game does have its fair share of recolors, I do my best to make sure that there's still unique eye candy and fun things to fight and have a personality. And that's results in, yeah, we have to stare at things and go, we can borrow from this, we can move this over here, recolor that, retexture, new thing. You see that a lot with armor, in fact, because in fact, in most armor cases, the hands are the same mesh. I don't see a real need to remodel the hand every time I do a new armor set, and that just comes from like, all right, I need a new armor set for this week. I like the bracers on this guy, the boots on this guy, and then we'll redo the torso from the ground up, and then we now have a new set, which I should give you an example of. So, ignore the head. Take this guy here. So this was the Fem armor set I was referring to earlier. Close to the release, I was in need of some new armor sets, and so I was working on these skelly suits. You'll notice certain aspects, like the boots in particular, the leg structure. You go over to the skelly set. Bam. Recycled. But we changed enough on it that it still feels like a unique and impressive asset. One would say probably a bit pointy of an asset, but still. I think I'm a little guilty of the Final Fantasy extra unnecessary belts. Yeah, actually, just notice the pelvis is also reused on the lizard suit from that set. The thigh, this whole structure here. Not much else though. This set was pretty unique in that respect. So this tail has caused me nothing but problems when dealing with accessories. Because I constantly have to go, will that intersect with the tail? Blinky eyes. Well, I'm down to my last 10 minutes. If there's something that I haven't covered that something you were hoping to hear?
Can you talk about your career path?
My career path?
Sure.
Well, I started out doing the comics, and in college I knew I wanted to go into video games. I liked the scene I was seeing, these small groups of people making interesting things that they were dedicated to. As I was getting done with college, I look again at the industry and I see the opposite of that. I see Hollywood, I see these big studios spending millions of dollars on movie tie-ins and things that I have no creative interest in. And so that really disheartened me, and I was actually getting ready to give up on the game industry altogether until I got a poke from a friend on the West Coast about this company called 3 Rings. And I'm like, what the hell, I'll send them a portfolio. And they really liked my stuff, I came out, I really liked what they were doing and what they were offering me, and it really clicked, it lucked out, it renewed my faith in the game industry. And I'd say since then, the industry is starting to see a return back to the little groups of people, the little fun side projects that are supporting about 4 or 5 people. Because one thing I'll mention about Spiral Knights, while we are published by Sega and such, the core game is developed by 7 people. 2 artists, myself included, 2 level designers, 2 engineers, and a designer. We're a tight-knit bunch. We really enjoy what we do. When I started at 3 Rings, though, I was doing Puzzle Pirate artwork and being told I was ruining the game repeatedly. When I first started, I was asked to make some. I was asked to make some clothing for the game, so I started working on various outfits and such. And I was just laughing that I was told I was ruining the game. You like this one? No, I have to laugh. This set here, it's very popular game. It's very reminiscent of the Aladdin character Jasmine, and I was just laughing at the forum feedback I got about this piece, telling me, this game, children play this game. Look at all that exposed skin. That's scandalous. Like, it's from a G-rated movie. Though I'll point out, a month later we released Pets, and then people were like, what the hell is this Pokemon crap? You're ruining the game! Kids. So I've just decided that the people that enjoy your work, they're still playing the game. Everyone else that is posting the loud things, those are the people that just aren't happy. And you got to take that in stride. You can't just ignore it, but you can't let that really cripple you as far as your development. Well, I worked on Puzzle Pirates for a while, almost a year, moved on to Bang Howdy, which was another project. I was on that for a year and a half-ish, doing more arts, obviously, low poly characters. It was much more at home doing that than Puzzle Pirates. And then from there to Worlds, where I switched over to Flash-type stuff. I had a lot of fun with that because it gave me a tremendous amount of freedom in what I was doing. I got to spend a good long time just making cute characters. While I was working on that, though, I was tasked by Nick, the designer, to help him lead up this project that he was working on called Project X. And from there,
How long were you working at Febuary before Spiral 9 started production?
I want to say about 3 years. I can't be sure, though. I think I've been at the company for 6 this May. Not 100% sure, though. It's been a wild ride.
How much influence does Sega have on yourself?
I can't really comment on that respect because I'm not on the design team. For me, it's always I get handed, like, hey, this is what we're lacking in the game, this is what we need in the game, and then I work on that.
If you were given free reign to work on something, what would you work on?
You know, I often have those daydreams of just making, you know, those video games, just making my payments and such just based on the little hobbies that I put out on the internet. But it's really tough to narrow it down. I still would love to do a, I want to say, survival horror roguelike. I think that could be pretty intense. But if I have to admit, considering my repertoire of cute things, kind of goes counter to that.
Can't have cute zombies?
And not have, without inflicting, you know, the lack of horror that I'm going for, yeah, probably not. Anything else before I call it quits? You've been a great audience.
Do you have any slight concept art?
Maybe. Let me take a look. Got a feeling the only snipe concept art is actually from this picture.
Oh, okay.
I think this guy right here is where I do this little peep doodle and that's it, that's what I'm making. The impression I wanted was, I wanted a lazy looking bird. I wanted something that looked like, if it had an inner tube, it would just float down all day. So, you can't really see it in this concept, but the wings fold under the bird when it's in a seated position, and that's reminiscent of how a cat perches down. It gives you that sense of, you know, laziness. All right. I think we're good to go, so thank you everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.